admitting everyone. All right. Hi, everybody. We got folks trickling in, and I think we'll just get started. My name is Brooke Decker. Many of you know me, I think. I am the pollinator health specialist, and we have Nick Delaney here today to give a really exciting presentation. I think you're all going to enjoy it. Nick has great experience as a commercial beekeeper for many years, as a seasonal inspector also in New York for many years. So we are excited to have him on our team now, working with the great state of Vermont and you all. So I think without further ado, we can just get started, and there's folks still coming in. So, oh, one announcement. Sorry, I just said I was going to do this. There, if you like learning through webinars, there is another. It's the New England Lunch and Learn series that's put on through the Apiary Inspectors of America and hosted through the Massachusetts Apiary Program. And I'm going to put a link in the chat for how to register. Oops, I just put a different link in there. It was a AAA Labs might. Let me put the actual link in there. In the chat for you to register for that. It's tomorrow from noon to 1:30. And now we can send it to Nick to take it away.
Hey, everybody. Thank you very much. So I did commercial work for about 12 years, 4 years in New York State inspecting. This has been my first year in Vermont. And first of all, everybody's been incredibly nice and helpful. So thank you very much. And especially if any of you I've worked with already. It's been a real joy this year. The idea behind the talk here is to really look at sort of the workload that goes into the bees. The workload that goes into the bees and that the bees are putting in to help sort of structure our own workload, how we approach it, how we react to things, and especially in the fact that, same thing when I was in the Adirondacks in New York, super short season and a hard winter to get through. So we've sort of got to peg everything around that. So, there's been this boom in beekeeping, and so we all know why. We all got into this because something excited us, something captivated us, or, any number of motivators. But moving into what is always the tricky part, especially when it's your first time doing it. And, bees have numbers. We fly solo. Some of us get to do this with our partners or friends or a mentor, but a lot of times we end up in situations where we're sort of stuck taking it just on ourselves. So thinking about how to plan and prepare for it, I think really helps take some of the daunting aspect of that out and helps get us ready to go into it. Bees are always working, so bees work, we work. There's always something to do. So another thing that sort of helps with that is being organized when we go in, and also making sure that we sort of have our effort defined, or we know how we're going to go about it and the things we're going to put into it. And as we've all seen this year, if you had a hard swarm year, like a lot of folks have, what should happen isn't always what actually happens. Volatility across a number of factors, including the season itself, but then just the bees do things that we don't expect them to do or we don't think they're going to do. So, when we have the planning, the prep, the organizing, the workload down, it can help us really react in a better way. And then can't make heads or abdomens of this. So frame of reference, especially when you're a new beekeeper or you've only been at it for so long or you have one hive, you don't have necessarily the background in just seeing these things, doing these things over and over and over again that sideliners, pros do, or somebody who's just been at it for decades. So I totally encourage with clubs, associations, the VBA, get involved. Those things will give you more windows in and more chances to work hives, but also this is why it's good sometimes to have inspectors by or other people. You just get a frame of reference, but also we'll look at ways of building that. So the intent informs the workload. everybody, when you look at it from a commercial perspective, everybody does a little of the three basic things. They pick a primary, and you're always doing some of the rest. Honey, hive products, pollination, raising bees. The bees are going to do these things anyways. It's what they need. It's this numbers game. They're really going to push. Now, some of us are in it just for enjoyment or getting to survive or knowledge. They're still going to do these three things. So putting it into your idea about what either you want to get out of your hives when you're working it, or what they're in the process of doing most right now, will help decide what your actions are going to take, what equipment you need, how much time you need to spend, how much time you have to get the job done. And one of the bottom lines is a lot of times when I come to places, people, commercial operations are also always scrambling to get enough equipment. Infrastructure is king. You need boxes, you need frames, you need to be able to handle things. You should at least, I think, have a spare nuke on hand. I know not all of this stuff is always accessible in terms of, it's costing more and more money. Everything is. But if you can even look up the plans for how to assemble something, or even keep like the Jester boxes you get, having just something there so when you're in an emergency to hold frames, to make a quick split, to make increase, you're going to need it. And, if you can't keep multiple supers per hive, at least try to be ready to extract as fast as you can. Keep this in mind so that way, when you do come into a pinch, you're ready. And one of the big bottlenecks everybody runs into, whenever we end up with more foundation than we have comb frames, you're going to slow down. The bees are going to slow down. We'll get into it later, but wax production is incredibly labor intensive and resource intensive. So when all you have is foundation, just know it's going to be a harder go for you. You're always going to be fighting behind the curve a little bit more, but it'll be nice as you build up comb. I think really the four big factors we can focus on as beekeepers that really influence where everything goes. Mites, they're always there. It's an outsized impact. We'll get into it more. You can see that nice blast of red in the drones. But they just drag everything down. They throw everything off as soon as they get to a point where they can. Nutrition is monumental. These large hives, they can't get by and stay large and keep doing what they do without a lot of protein and carbohydrate. That's why they gather as much as they do. They need that protein for brood, carbohydrate for themselves, everything going in big, big numbers. So when we hit weird gaps in the year or dearths, we need to be mindful of, is everything set up for that? If you're going to do supplemental feeding, get on it as soon as you can in the spring or in the fall. If you want to stay natural, then we really got to think about what the forage is around. So space, room to store and lay stuff, expansion, contraction, comb again, like we were talking about. Space is something we can give or take away as our bees need it, and really help them, be able to produce more or control temperatures or things like that. And that gets into brood. You need large populations cycling through replenishment so that you have this long stretch of aging bees where your younger bees can be taking all these delicate tasks, your older bees more difficult tasks and out to foraging. So when these cycles get broken up on that brood, you really also lose a ton of time. If they don't have the brood, they're not going to use the space. They can't get enough nutrition, and mites can get on top of them even more. So these are really the biggest four things I think we monitor and work with. And I think this is a big question not everybody puts in their head when you go out to work. What's the minimum you need to get done? What is the maximum you want to get done? Really take the time to define these things for yourself. They will not only give you direction, but when it goes really wrong and you find yourself behind the gun and worried and nervous, this will help give you a grounding to build off of. It's overwhelming, especially when you're out there alone. It's overwhelming to get behind the gun or realize that things aren't going the way you wanted. But if you can default to a minimum, this was the only thing I needed to do today, that's what you can get done. And I think a big part of being organized in that too, there's the French culinary term mise en place, putting in place. It's a habit to get into. It helps me from beekeeping to cooking, whatever. Get it all ready beforehand. Set it up. Put it in place. Identify your goals. Write a list out of all the steps. It might feel redundant, it might feel childish or too instructional, but it's going to start putting that, habitual growth in your head of what you're doing and why. Literally, arrange all your equipment, set up where everything should go, prepare it so it's right where you want it to be, make room to open your hives so then you know where they're going, where the parts are going to come off. You're going to stack supers on top of the lid over here. And literally, again, it might feel a little silly as well, but mock run what you're going to do. Take a quick moment to just practice the motions. You might realize, oh, shoot, that's not going to work well, or, oh, I need this thing and I forgot that. Normally that's here. It's going to maximize your efficiency. It's going to build your confidence. And then next time you can make adjustments. You have a game plan to run off of it, and you have a piece of paper or something you can make a note on. It takes extra time, but it really pays out. And you can even practice that stuff before you're going to work on a day you're not going to work. But, a lot of times I see folks get out there, they get confused about what they need to be doing, they forget, or they get overwhelmed, and then they don't have stuff around. Not the end of the world. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it will help you get through more efficiently, confidently, and maximize what you're doing. I'm not on the... There we go. So the idea to me is be another bee. Again, we're talking about doing things the bees already do and adding to it. So bees are always communicating, observing, examining, assessing their own hives. We can do the same thing. Take the time to look, go slow enough to compare and contrast. I know not every time we have as much time as we wish. We'll get into that with the volatility. But your biggest things, again, make an assessment of the bees, the brood, the nectar, the pollen, the wax. And also, if there's enough bees in the hive at the time, are you seeing any other telltale signs? The mites, because that's part of the bees. That's part of the brood as well. So at least have a sense of those things. Be a part of the hive. The bees clean, groom, nurse, move, build, reduce, generate stores, feed each other, find new hives, replace queens. We do all of that too. You're just another bee or a giant one who counts as a bunch. Anything we take away from the bees that they have to spend energy and resources on is something that then they can be either taking off of their own plate so there's less resource consumption, or they can redirect and go to better things. If they're not spending, this is a big thing with foundation and comb. If they don't have to spend all that time building the foundation out and all the extra honey it takes, then they can store it faster, or when you give them comb over foundation, the queen will be laying in it faster. So that's kind of a way to think about it. And I think it helps direct what we're up to in our motions. If we stop for a minute, think, what are the bees doing right now? If I'm another bee, what else am I doing to be a part of this right now and help it out? So frame your work as hive work rather than beekeeper work is one of the ways I like to do it. So just again, going over, beekeeping is often support work. At a minimum, we're trying to get these hives to survive. At a maximum, we're trying to help them create a surefit. And even if we're not planning on taking it, the sheer numbers of what they're up to, they want it, they need it. So again, even if we're going to leave honey, do they have enough? If we're going to take it, they have enough after we've taken it. This is one of the hardest habits. It's the least maybe fun for some folks, but I promise you this pays huge dividends. Whatever you want to use to keep notes, and we'll get into one of my favorite quick ones at the end. It's already even listed in here. Just be uniform, regardless of the depth of detail. Even if you're just doing a plus or a minus, a smiley face, whatever, something that's uniform for you covers the basics, an environmental factor, a colony factor in your work. These are examples in there of things you can put in, the weather, the blooms that are currently going, temperatures, the date and the time. Some folks like to do exact frame counts where they'll literally just count the number of frames and mark what they saw stored in it. How are they behaving? This is a way of creating a frame of reference as well as solidifying skills. Now you can start comparing your year, your days, your months. You can start seeing a shape of things and not always just relying on memory in case you forget something or it gets odd. Keeping notes was one of the biggest changes in my beekeeping, from going from just, getting through and rushing and always feeling under it to feeling more on top of it. It centers you again, much like these other behaviors, gets you focused on what you're really doing, what the time is, why you're in there, and gives you something again to look back on, to build off of, so that you're aware of any trends or things you might have missed if you hadn't had it. And it's always good to also in there note down what worked, what didn't work, and what your next steps are, because that'll inform when you go back to go in again and you start thinking about your minimum and your maximum to get done. You already have a blueprint from last time to help guide you. So it's a numbers game, right? The way the hives grow and the way they work help inform what we're doing. Again, think of yourself as part of that hive, and ultimately we're looking to hedge bets, cover debts, and with a short season, we're running out of time. So we really need to think about these growth patterns. And the numbers we're about to get into, it isn't that everybody needs to memorize them, but if the general shape of these things sits in your head, it's going to put you in a mindset that better understands just how much growth you're seeing or just how much decline. How bad do the bees need something? How much might they use coming up? And some of these numbers are going to be some, generalizations pulled out of various data and out of different, extrapolation. But the reality is they're at least close enough to inform a framework. So honey numbers. We've probably all heard these a bit sometimes. One worker bee visits 50 to 100 flowers per collection flight. Sometimes it's more than that. One worker bee only makes 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in their lifetime. That's it. But it takes 2 million flowers to make a pound of honey. A pound of honey takes about 55,000 miles of flight. That's going around the earth twice. Then, here's the foundation and comb issue. A pound of bee wax is theorized to take about 6 to 8 pounds of honey. It's a massive accomplishment. When we see those boxes start filling up fast, start thinking about exactly how much is going into that it is a massive amount of work, which is also why when they can't get it because they're too weak or the environment isn't cooperating, this is how far they're being set back. And if we look at, originally there's an old form of this chart that now CarolinaHoneybees.com, I found this one on. The old chart from the ABC and XYZ of honeybees that I had is too faded to use in here, but breaks down the same way. This is a flight factor we don't often think about. And if you look at how honeybees forage, and we'll get into return rates on how far they go and how much they make or how much they consume in the process. But look at that. By 2 miles out, you're on over 8,000 acres of forage. It is so much more than we initially think when we look around and we see our gardens out in front of us or the farm nearby or the place across the street. Now, yep, they're going to want to go to the best stuff, the closest, if they have it, but they might not be. One of the big parts in a commercial apiary that's geared towards honey, like the one I used to work in, especially when we did a lot of single varietals on top of the wildflower mix, is we spent a lot of time literally just charting yards, driving places, knocking on doors, looking for landowners. Now, I know that's not what everybody's doing on a hobby level or needs to, but I think it's good for everybody to pull up GPS, pull up the satellite. There's a measure distance tool on Google Maps. You can drop a point on where your hives are, and then you scan and it'll say measure distance. You can do it on your phone or on the web. And then you can literally just drag a line out to 3 miles. This is about max honey production range. And circle your area. Take a look. See what you see on there in terms of fields, trees. Then, if you've got the time, I really think it's worth it for you to drive around, even a couple of times a year. Drive that area and see, okay, what's actually in bloom. If you see an abundant bloom, pull over. Are there bees in it? Your neighbors might have them too, but yours are probably there if they're within flight range. This will really inform you again as to the sheer scope and scale of what's going on and why things like space are important, why brood is important, having those numbers, why nutrition is important because of how hard they're working, how much they're flying, how much you want them to make a surplus if you're going to take honey or get them through the winter. And then how important it is that the bees are as healthy as can be so that things like mites are down, because this is a monumental task. And even with 50 to 40,000 individuals, and again, some of those are staying in and doing nursing, other ones are flying. This is huge. It's absolutely mind-boggling when you think about how much weight they put on, how much wax they build, you know. So consider our workflow against their workflow and how we're trying to prepare for this in terms of how well are they handling this massive task? How badly are they in need of support on it? Or how far have they fallen away from this monumental task? And then building them back up, what that takes. And it gets harder, especially with something like a mite problem, because you've got to go further forward than you think. So here's from J.E. Eckert, the chart on the left, and I just kept up again. I used a program because my math skills are poor, but did the acres covered for those radiuses right there. So being active uses up a lot of honey. You can see J.E. Eckert, I think it was in the 20s or 30s, they did a study where they did distance from irrigated area. You can see it on the left of the column, sweet clover and alfalfa, average change in hive weights over 18 days. So you can see over 18 days, up close, they could put on 25 pounds. They were traveling further, though. They could hit at a half a mile. You know, they were already hitting way more space and able to actually make more weight. So they were putting on 31.6 pounds. And you can see it goes all the way to 3 miles. At 4 miles, they were still bringing back weight. But again, these were areas that were crazy abundant, just hugely planted with sweet clover and alfalfa. So typically, unless you've got those kinds of really bumper crop areas, 3 miles is your max limit for what your bees are going to be able to make a crop on, or at least stores for themselves. But again, clearly, as we can see, there's big differences. 2 miles less is a full extra 10 pounds in those days. And again, think of the sheer number, one bee making a 12th of a teaspoon. So this is why knowing your area, thinking about it, driving around really helps. Then you'll know, how hard are my bees working? When they're losing weight, but I'm seeing flowers, is it because they're flying too far? Or maybe the ones that are in bloom aren't the right kind and they want something different? Or maybe because of a drought, we're out of nectar? Or that beautiful black locust that bloomed got all beat up by the rain and now there's no nectar in it, even though I see it blooming. So it's a way of taking these numbers in math and thinking, okay, I know within a half mile there's all that black locust. So the bees, under ideal conditions, if the temps are right and everything else, should be pouring on weight, but I'm not getting it. Okay, so something's going wrong. Then you start to take your workflow into thinking not just about, boom, I should be getting tons of honey, but something is inhibiting this phenomenon. And I need to start thinking about what it might be and how do I need to work to help? Is this something where now we're going to end up with, I need to feed, or I need to take less so they keep more? So again, you don't have to know these numbers. You don't have to know. I'll go back once again quick, because look, even there, 100 yards is 6.5 acres. Half a mile is 502 acres. You don't have to know these numbers exactly. We should know that under 3 miles, they're probably not making anything, but they are covering somewhere around 18,000 acres, huge amounts. Keep the vastness in your head and the idea of the closer to home, the more they make. So that way you use that to know your area, know your hive, know your expectations, and then you can read the tea leaves a bit on when it's not working the way you think. Or maybe it's even going better than you hoped, and how is this happening? Then go around, take another drive, see what they're in, see what's blooming. Now, getting into how honey consumption works with the winter and the cool points of the year, I think it's another eye-opener. So these two charts come off of Randy Oliver's Scientific Beekeeping. They're representing E. Southwick's 1982 work. Keeping bees, but especially keeping brood warm, uses up a ton of honey. If you look at the chart, all the way on the left, the bottom is negative 20 Celsius, negative 4 Fahrenheit. So the metabolic rate up there, if you compare that to the bottom of the chart, they're going to be using somewhere around 70 to 80 pounds maybe of honey that winter. Now, again, these are probably also not the same prolonged winters we have, but it lets you know if you follow that graph down as it hits its first slump in the 30s and 40s, they're actually not tearing up a ton of honey. You've almost, you're not quite have their honey consumption for the winter, but in a mild winter, they're not eating as much honey. They're doing very well with it. But all of a sudden, we're spiking again when it's getting warmer. Instead of it being easier for them, now we know in the winter they cluster, they're not doing as much, they're more dormant, they're smaller bees. So, yeah, of course, hey, they're getting more active. But why do we see it spike more when it's cool out and start to drop off again when it's warm? Well, because when it's warm, unless it's crazy warm, they don't have to spend as much energy on temperature because they can do more things like fanning or dropping water in the hive to force evaporation to cool it. But what we really see in those cool temperatures, those 50s into, just below 70, the reason that we're seeing a spike again and even going above 71 pounds of winter consumption, we're seeing a metabolic rate even above minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit at that spike, is because there's brood to keep warm. They have to work harder to keep that brood warm. This is your early spring or a slow spring or your fall that keeps going on just warm enough where brood production is maintained. They have protein for it, or you're putting on the patties. But they're also, while you want them to build up, they have to keep that brood warm, and they're also going to hatch that brood, and there's more bees to feed. So we really can, again, use this thinking of the numbers, the sheer weight. Again, you don't have to memorize them, but you do have to know deep cold, my bees are eating even more. Slow spring, long fall, cool temperatures, they're trying to get brood going. They're using even more. This is the classic, they seemed fine coming out of winter, all of a sudden they starved on me this spring. Or sometimes people don't even know they starved in the fall before they got to winter, truly into winter. And it can be because of this. So, again, you don't have to know their metabolic rate. You don't have to know it. But you should have an idea of how it affects them and how they use it. This, again, lets you know how far off am I on weight as I prepare for winter? How light am I really coming out of winter this spring? Especially if you can think about sort of how heavy they were. If you were keeping notes and you wrote down 15 frames deep full of honey, and you get to spring and they still have 5 left, and you think that's enough to get them through spring and they starve out on you, then you have to start thinking about, okay, that wasn't enough, and I should think about the fact that, yeah, they were going to use more this spring, or maybe they didn't get through your winter with those 15 frames, and now next winter we should be trying for even more weight in that hive. It's a lot of work. The bees need all hands on deck. This is why we should be an extra bee. How hard are they working right now? Are they getting what they need from that? Can we do some of that work? Anything we do that acts as another part of the hive and helps achieve these goals of healthy bees, low mites, of nutrition, of proper amount of space, of having good brood, means that they can reduce their interruption for having to handle a task like mites. They can boost their own focus on the things that they really want and need and are best for them right now. They can increase their population, which is going to help achieve those goals. As we see, they need that large group. They need those varying ages. It's going to get them that surplus that lets them get through dearths, lets them get through winter, and we get to steal if we want it. So, again, taking pressure off of those sources and letting them maximize what they're doing prepares them for hard times. So, again, I just would like to say early spring, late fall, deep winter, these are our starvation risks. They are driving honey consumption. We don't have to remember the metabolic rate. We just have to know the bees have to fight hard in the deep cold. They do better in the 30s to 40s on a mild winter. And then when they're coming into spring, and they're going into fall, they're fighting hard to keep brood warm and population up for the cluster, or coming out of that diminished cluster, they want to replenish it. So those are starvation risk periods. Brood production. If you're going to memorize any numbers, it's essentially the little chart over here from Michael Bush's website. Knowing, I'll tell you right now, commercial, sideliners, any of those folks, what they are doing and how they are plotting themselves in their timetables is always, especially queen rearers, of course, are the numbers and the math behind brood hatching or queens hatching. You're always playing with those numbers and paying attention to them because you're using that as the timetable to influence your work, when to make splits, when to expect them to start doing this, gauge what you need to help more, what needs less help or needs to be weakened because it's going to get too strong. So queen's laying 1,000, 2,000 eggs a day at peak. When she's at 2,000 plus, and again, that's a very good queen, that's not all queens, that's more than her body weight in a day in eggs. So, and again, also, all this stuff needs to be fed. They need to be taking in protein. They need to be, creating feed, the royal jelly, all these things. More resources getting used. There are roughly 7,000 cells across a deep frame, a standard deep frame, both sides. So when you pull out that giant, beautiful frame of brood and 70% sealed, 50% sealed, do the quick math. If you're looking at 50% sealed, you're still looking at 3,500 bees across both sides. So this gives you an idea, okay, how many frames do I have? How big is that hatch out? This is going to be a major hatch out because I'm at 90%. This is going to be a small hatch out. This one only has, maybe a few hundred coming out. So they're not going to get as many bees as they need to maybe replenish right now. If I have extra brood from another colony, can I boost it? And eggs. Eggs are really the best way to be checking for queen right. You can have fun, or sometimes you can lose your mind trying to get good at spotting queens. But if you have fresh eggs, eggs are only 3 days old. Look at the left hand of the chart from Bush. So no matter the caste, queen, worker, drone, the hatch period is 3.5 days. So any eggs, now laid correctly and nicely and not all over the place, like possibly a drone layer, laying workers, which is bees, a queen that's improperly mated and can only make drones, or bees who have been long enough without a queen where the workers can start producing drone eggs. When you're seeing nice centered single shot eggs, like in the background image here, courtesy of data on this one, if I don't say who the images came from, there because they're mine, which is most of them. But we know there's a queen within 3 days. This is how the walk-away split works, right? If you separate them and you're not sure where the queen is, come back in 3 days. Who has eggs? Because by then, anything without a queen, they've fallen over and they've hatched. So there's no queen in there. So if it's just larvae, do I have a queen? If I see eggs, I know she's there. If you want to have fun hunting for her and getting good at it, work on it. But if it's one of those things that infuriates you and drives you nuts, part of the ethos you'll see ahead is simplify it for yourself, because it's only going to make you do better work. It's only, again, your minimum. Your minimum is to know it's queen right, not see the queen. So you've got eggs, you're good. It can be handy to know that middle column of capping when those larvae get capped. But what you really need to think about more is the emerging column. So again, you don't need to memorize eggs 3 days is a pretty simple one, but emerging is very important because it tells you what kind of cycle you might be on when you're seeing them hatch out or you're seeing eggs, this many eggs. Okay, I've got almost 3 weeks before that's going to hatch out. Knowing that will really help focus your idea of how your population is growing more than just, whoa, there's more bees than last time, or where did all the bees go? Well, how much brood was there last time? And then these things, these certainties in these numbers begin to help point you in the right direction of where an emergency or an issue might be, because you're leaving the realm of, well, I thought this, and into, hey, this should actually be a point at which I'm having a hatch out. What happened? Was it a dearth? Did the bees cannibalize? Is it mite pressure? Am I losing brood? What's going on? Or, okay, I now have so many bees they're trying to swarm. How did that happen? You had 7 sealed frames that were 90% full. And we know how many cells there are on those frames, and we know how many eggs got laid. So use these as, again, a really good navigating point. These are the nice, firm, hard numbers here. So, and again, look at with a queen, you go all the way across. She's not laying, if she's mated successfully, until about 28 days later from egg to this point, plus or minus 5 days roughly. So if we go over to the napkin math, a month plus without new brood while raising a queen from cell to mated, if she makes it, if she's not eaten by a bird or she mates properly, you know you're going to have about a month or a little more without new brood. Can your hive build back after that? Is there enough time left in the season, especially when they're not going to get another, hopefully 2,000 if she's a really good queen, another 2,000 bees until 20 days later? So you can start to do that napkin math about how much time do I have? How fast are they going to build up? How slow is this going to be? How much time is left in the season? Does this split make sense right now? Or am I just trying to make this split to stop that hive from fully swarming and then figuring out how to recombine them? Should I go buy a mated queen? It is why frequently a lot of people don't really try to requeen much after August, because a lot of times, even if you can get them queen right again, they're not going to get the numbers back up, because it's still to get to an effective cluster size, to get weight on, to get protein in. The numbers game they've got to catch up on is, again, we're looking at every 3 weeks before a hatch out, depending on how many were actually laid, and they're not going to be able to. The queen, we saw how much honey it takes to keep brood warm. The queen, especially towards the fall, where we're getting cold nights and stuff again, they're not going to be able to lay more eggs than they can keep warm and they can cover. The bees will actually cannibalize what can't be used and regain those resources. So this will help you adjust your expectations, interpret changes. The other one's keeping that sort of sweeping mindset, but really on brood. If you can, print this thing out, laminate it. There's a variety of other charts on it. I just grabbed the nice simple one off of bushfarms.com under the section Bees Math. This is one, laminate it, just pin it to a hive. It'll give you a little bit of an inward key to deciphering what's going on with population fluctuations, capability to gather stuff. And another one that's going to help with that is thinking about mites, because nothing creates that unseen drag on your hive as much as mites do. So worker brood, you're hatching workers every 20, 21 days. You're also hatching 1 to 2 daughters, plus the foundress who dropped in there to lay the eggs. So 1 to 2 daughter mites. So about 2 to 3 mites are emerging from a cell. Out of your drone, 3 to 4 are coming out. They're going to reproduce each one of those. The foundress can do about 3 to 7 cycles, they think. Again, we're still learning a lot about this stuff. So now you can start to look at the fact, why does mite population double about once a month? Because as your bees expand, your mites expand, and they get to a point where they're laying and hatching even more than your bees. When they get to that point, it's already too much. So this is why 2 to 3% infestation isn't really, it's a threshold. It's not a goal, it's a cliffhanger. You're hanging on at this point at 2 to 3%. You can pull yourself back up. You have time, knock them back. You might see some damage. But again, 2 to 3% next month is going to be 6%, 4-6% or more. And by the time we hit 5 to 7% infestation levels, trouble's begun. Viruses are starting to show up, or they're setting in even if you don't see them yet. Your bees are damaged, they're malformed, they're weak, they're immunocompromised. And again, this is a numbers game. This takes all of those bees working this hard at insanely small increments to pull off massive amounts of storage and success. So when they start to be fed on and destroyed, it's pulling them back. High samples for mites, or when we start to see visible infestation damage or lots of mites on top of the bees, which, by the way, that's about, from studies from Samuel Ramsey, that's only about 1% of the mites that are actually on your bees, because most of them are under the bee, tucked into the abdomen feeding. So visual analysis doesn't do enough for us in my eyes. This is why we like to do the washes or just set up a routine treatment pattern or whatever mitigation pattern. If you're using drones and swarming and splitting and things, drone control is part of your, if you're going natural, it's important, because this is the way. When you finally see it and say, oh no, this is mites, you're not even at the crest of the wave. You're at the wall, because the mites in there are still breeding, still hatching, still feeding. So whatever you're seeing is literally just a point of the curve of that exponential growth. So if you can keep it down, you can keep it just regular waters, you're not going to try to sail up the wave and over and get toppled by it or through a bunch of them. By the time you're having problems and they can show up, you might go in this time and you could be at 5-7%, but you're not really seeing the viruses yet because you're just there. You're going to come back in a couple weeks to a month, they're at 10 to 14% mites, and by then it goes from what happened, they looked great, to they're dying. So this is another one. You don't have to know the numbers, you have to know the exponential growth factor, and that what you're seeing now in 2 weeks is going to be already worse, and in 4 weeks is going to be double what you're seeing. And if you're not seeing anything because you're not doing a wash or something, you're really kind of clueless. So at least I hope you have a mitigation plan in place that's letting your bees do the work they need to do, not dragging them back. Because mites don't stay in one place. They're going to transfer from drift, robbing, swarming, and other sources. Again, look at this picture here. I'm so glad I found this on Reddit from a user named MicroBeeman. That would be the size of a mite scaled up on your body. Ticks are horrible. We already hate having a tick or a flea or whatever on us. Think of your bees as if, again, make yourself a bee. Think of having one of these. Never mind maybe 5, 3, 5 crawling around on your body. They puncture you. They start drinking up part of you. No wonder you're weak, malformed, you have an open wound, viruses are setting in, your immune system can't handle it. Even if you had all the nutrition in the world, suddenly why did my bees die? They had tons of honey and pollen. Because they can't make any use out of it. They're beat up. Their function is reduced. Their lifespans are reduced. They're going to collapse. And even when you're trying to fight back from that, even if you put in that formic and it blows all those mites down, the viruses are still there. They've still got to get through it. They're still going to have this chance. And your top 3 that we typically see, there's a lot of viruses, mites vector, deformed wing virus. The wings start looking like wet, rolled up paper towels or missing entirely, shredded. The bees come out in off colors, sluggish. Paralysis virus. Why are there so many bees just in the front of my hive crawling on the ground and not doing anything? They don't ever get up and fly. They're probably dealing with acute or some form of acute or chronic bee paralysis virus. And parasitic mite syndrome. Part of checking your brood and getting an assessment there is, okay, hygienic qualities are great. I like to see the bees smelling mite pheromone, ripping up the pupa, ripping up larvae, dragging them out. But are they ripping up a lot? Is this like a ton? Does that mean we have a lot of mites? Or am I also seeing larvae that just look like sloppy, sunken, white, soupy messes? The rotting part, again, mites. So not only do the adult bees and the ones who are hatched or come out, are they getting dragged down by these mites, because the mite has to feed in the cell and it has to feed on the bee. It's feeding in 2 spots, so it's dragging adults down and it's dragging larvae down. You get weakened adults who can't do what they need to do, and you get larvae that's not healthy enough to even hatch. Or if it does hatch, it's already sick and behind the game. So suddenly, again, we need those numbers to pull off the other numbers. They start to collapse. And it's very hard to come back from that, because you're not just coming back from, I got rid of the mites. You're coming back from how far that wave shoved you backwards or knocked you over. And there's still waves coming until they're finally done, because the viruses are there, the weakness is there, the wounds are there. So beekeeping, regardless whether we want it or not, is too often about reacting because there's so much we don't control. It's part of the fun of it too. It's part of what I fell in love with, is that you have very tangible realities with your hives. You can see all the honey you made or didn't make. You can see how big the bees got or how far back. It gives you these really great visual and physical cues to feed off of and understand and appreciate. It puts you in touch with the year, but it's volatility. All agriculture is. It's full of volatility. So the bees don't stop, the environment doesn't stop. We sort of use our farming or our apiculture as a way of investigating, examining, and being a part of it, but we don't have control over a lot of it. But we do have some control over the key variables of keeping mites down, so keeping the bees healthy, nutrition when they're in need of pollen sub or sugar syrup. You don't want to replace what they have necessarily unless you're trying to get them into winter and you took too much, so you got to build them up. But you want to make sure they have what they need to make brood, to go out and get honey when the flowers are in bloom, to get through that winter. Or if you don't want to do supplemental, then maybe you do need to drive around and find a better place to put them on a map and take a look and see what's there. They need the space to grow. They need the space contracted when they don't have the room. They don't need all that room anymore, and it would be a heat sink during the winter. And they need these numbers. It's been a high swarm year. I put a picture of a swarm here. You know, it seemed like we got caught with the yo-yo of the spring started, then it sunk down with rain and cold. The bees got cooped up. They didn't know what to do with themselves. What's a natural mechanism for bees to handle things they can't control? Swarm, abscond. On top of propagation, it's the, I don't know what to do with this. I can't do anything with this. I better leave. Maybe somewhere else will be better. So we had a heavy swarm year to start. Then I've still heard a lot of people having weird swarms across the summer and across the fall here. Is that genetics? Is that wildfire smoke? Is that mites you didn't realize are there? So volatility. We have pests, you know, bears, skunks, pathogens, mites, and well, mites are pests, pathogens, the viruses, you know, pesticides, the weather. Then you have a short season, so all the volatility is even more volatile than it would be in a long, soft area because you don't have as much time to handle it or react to it. There's habitat loss. Maybe you didn't realize down the street that that field that's, you know, on the side of the back roads you never drive anymore, that field that used to feed your bees got plowed over and it's now a house. Or maybe where they used to plant pumpkins is corn now. It's another reason to keep yourself updated on that. There's competition, you know, more bees than ever. Sometimes you don't realize that if I'd driven down that street, I would have known there's more hives in the neighborhood or a pro down there or something. So, and the bees themselves, they'll do strange things sometimes. They'll respond in a way you didn't anticipate, or you've killed the queen by accident and you didn't know it. And then volatility strikes because suddenly you're way behind on brood and you don't know if you have a new queen running around in there waiting to get mated or what. So if we try to stay on top of those four, it helps us when we get the inherent volatility. That's just part of the challenge. So there's a picture. This yard had a bear go through it. It managed to tip those over. This is actually one in the back got pulled. Thankfully, it couldn't get all the way in because of the fence. It just managed to reach over. So I got some of my favorite tricks and tips here, and we'll go to the little side on the right first, the triage comment first, just to give you an idea. Again, on volatility. Things change, stuff comes up, even in your own life, that can inhibit your ability to go out there and work. So that's why it's good. You'll have, if you have a minimum goal, you can default to it. I'm running out of time. I forgot we had to go here, or, you know, my sibling, my child just got hurt. I've got to leave real quick, or, you know, we ran out of this and I needed it. I just realized I have to go to the store. If you have a minimum and you can get it accomplished, you know that. Or if you come in and there's suddenly a volatile issue with your bees, you need to assess the new issue. Is it something that can wait, or is it urgent? Do you have the time for it? If it's urgent, set yourself a new minimum goal. Complete that. Just cut it down to its minimum. Do the parts. Don't get overwhelmed. Do the parts. Get it down to its smallest amount. Then you can regroup for later if it can wait, which is great. Then you can do thinking about, you can do your mise en place again. You can do mocking it up. You can do, even if later is, I'm going to put the hive back together right now because I don't know what I'm doing, or this is overwhelming me, or I'm confused about why I'm seeing this. I'm going to go spend some time thinking about this, researching, plotting it out, and I'm going to come back in an hour. Some of my favorite tips and tricks. Walk your apiary first. Before you do any work, and you can also do this anytime you're not about to work, go walk your bees. Take a look at what you're seeing on the ground in front of them, what's happening at the entrances, how they're reacting to you walking by them, where they're flying, how much pollen's coming in, what's it smell like in there. You know, everybody talks about the goldenrod with that funky sock smell. Are you smelling other sweet nectar smells? Are you smelling bad smells? Are you seeing skunk scat and scratches in front of your hives? Smokers, I promise you, it's worth getting an auto-ignite torch with a propane tank on it. I like to use pine shavings for the type of smoke, large bed animal pine shavings, but it's, if you're tired of hunting for what to burn in your smokers, $5-7 at an animal supply store, get the large bed pine animal shavings, stuff a smoker full of it, then light it from the outside. Sandy Von Allman out in New York, longtime beekeeper, super smart. The first time I saw her light her smoker by stuffing it full and then torching the outside at the bottom where the fuel is and burning it until it was glowing red hot and then smoke was going, blew my mind. Wish I'd always had it. It takes all the guesswork out of starting the fire, filling the smoker, getting it going. And when it runs out, you don't struggle to open the smoker again. You just torch the outside and it's going. I can't recommend the investment in time it'll save you enough. $40, $45 in a torch, $5-7 in shavings that you'll have more than enough for a long time. They don't go bad. Maybe you'll cook your smoker metal a little too much over the long run, but I'm willing to do it. Lots of things I've seen people do: have a bench, a cart, a table, something there. It really helps with mise en place. Then you have space to put things. You can stage your things, even if it's one you take away every time. Having some stuff to work with. I know sometimes our bees are crammed in weird spots for a variety of reasons, especially keeping them away from whoever we don't want stung. But, you know, if you can bring one with you and set it up, great. I like to work very frequently without a suit. I'll suit up if the bees tell me to, but make yourself comfortable. You're not going to get the work done and you're not going to enjoy it unless you're comfortable. Suit up, seal up, whatever you want to do. Make yourself comfortable and happy. This isn't anything where you have to do it any particular way when you go into them, other than the way that lets you work and enjoy it and learn. So notation: plastic note card on the top of the inner cover. Jack Rath, I believe, came up with this, at least when I first saw it at Better Bee. And if it was Ann, I apologize. I think Ann said it was Jack. Ann's phenomenal. Jack's phenomenal. But Jack, if it's his system, I think, they just have like a chunk of square plastic. Every time you pull an exterior cover off, chunk of plastic, and one quick shorthand line written in permanent marker with the date. Queen right, removed honey. Queenless, installed queen. Queen right, needs brood. 1021, 95, whatever. It's right there. As soon as you open the hive, you have a quick boom. Here's what's been going on with it. All right, now I remember and I'm in the game and I know what it might need next and what I'm doing. And then boom, I write it, I'm done. If you don't like to keep journals, you don't like to keep apps, you don't like to have this, and you're not going to go back and look at it, remember to look at it, now you have it. And you also know you're not really done with it until you put that back and you've signed off on what you've done. So a lot of these tips are keeping things simple and replicable, things you can do over and over. That's going to get the work done too. That's going to build your skill. Stuff you enjoy, stuff you can wrap your head around, stuff that's functional, that works, that's easy, that's not going to be a pain, that's not going to be something you abandon. The bee work is big enough, hard enough, and complicated enough already. Streamline it on the little things so that you can focus on what you're doing and do an even better job with it. Always pull your easy frame first. I know pull in frame 1 or 2 is recommended, but if those are too gummed up or there's too much drag and you think you're going to crush bees, look for the next easiest frame. It's not fun pulling a brood frame if you're not used to it because you're worried you might roll a queen, but if that's going to come out with no problems or pressure, do it. But if you feel any resistance, because even if the top looks good, if it's coming up and the bottom of the frame has burrcomb or drones, and you can start to feel all of a sudden a drag as it connects and it's ripping the other frames, put it down, stop, find another one. Just look for an easy frame. People having trouble seeing eggs, I see people all the time bring magnifying glasses with them. Great idea. Great idea. If you're having trouble seeing eggs, get a magnifying glass. You won't anymore. And you can still keep your gloves on, and you don't have to open your veil. It's perfect. Super's too heavy. Beekeeping's crazy heavy. It's the weight's there. Shoulder and your back are never going to thank you. You're talking about often dealing with weights between 40 and 60 pounds on supers, 80 to 90 pounds or more on deeps. If you can't lift that or you can't break it, have that. Again, infrastructure is king. Have a spare box, pull frame by frame by frame by frame by frame. It's slow, but you can do it. And it doesn't kill your back. It doesn't kill your arms. Do what you need to do. Make it work for you. The systems don't have to be dogmatic. You can shape things to your needs. Checking the strength from the bottom of the box. Well, the bottom of the frames is what I should have said on that. When you open the top of a hive and the bees are everywhere, they're active, you've just disturbed them, they're moving around, that's not really the true strength of that box. Look at the frames under the box. Tilt it up a deep, tilt up a super, a medium, where they're tightly clustered on the end bars of those frames. Even if they're spread over all 10 or 9 on top, you might see they're really only on 5 or 6, and that's probably where the brood is, or the most nectar's going in, or pollen. That's where they're actively working. That's the real idea of a quick concentration. If all you have time is to look in the box and not pull frames, quickly, boom, pop up. You can make a quick note. I saw 6 frames, bees all over the bottom bars. The others were too dispersed to count. So bottom of the frames on a box, quickest way to check a general sense of strength or activity. Monitor for mites before and after. I, again, really recommend the accuracy of alcohol washes. Monitor before and after you do something to mitigate mites, because then you know where you started and where it is afterwards. Either even more hatched out than you thought, or the mitigation wasn't as successful as you'd hoped. You're not going to know unless you check. And again, as we've seen, that wave factor from the mites, their damage, you might think you're not seeing anything, but you don't know until you look and until you confirm. It's a sleeper until it's there, and once it's there, it's a Godzilla tearing through the brood. You just, and it's too late. The cat's out of the bag. It's I don't know how many other animals I can cram into this right now. But anyways, you need to know. You don't need to be in the dark on this. You shouldn't be in the dark on this. It's another piece of information that doesn't have to be out of your hands. It's a piece of information you can have. It's a piece of information you can more accurately plan for, prepare for, and accurately work for. One of the best ways to get those samples, get a white tub, big white tub, plastic tub that a frame more than easily fits in. Then you can shake the whole frame into it. You've already looked for the queen, but you're bad at looking for queens. You're not sure, you're worried. Once they land in a white tub, your foragers are going to fly out in about 30 to 40 some odd seconds. The bees are going to spread out. You have this beautiful white backdrop, bright as can be. Great chance to see a queen. Dark queen, bright queen, big queen, small queen. It's one of the easiest ways to start looking. Get that magnifying glass out again. Just make it easier for yourself. Hedge your bets. And from Dick Crawford over across Champlain Lake in New York, he once told me, take your winter losses in the summer. Short seasons, all this effort and time just to put something in the winter to feel that crushing blow, when maybe you could have used it to goose up. And now, again, this isn't easily done with one colony. But if one of those colonies isn't going to make it and it's too damaged or it's too beat up, maybe it's time to just say it's going to die this winter. If I kill that queen and then I combine it with newspaper with the other one, that colony has an even better chance of getting through. Then again, this is redirecting your effort and time, redirecting their effort and time. As skills build, I've said this to a few of you already I've met this year, you're going to become a victim of your own success. This is, you don't have to, the backdrop here is the final load of bees I ever sent up from Georgia under a Georgia moonlit night. Load's finally on. We're about to start doing the nets. We're checking strapping and connections, doing last minute adjustments. You're not going to necessarily get to this, but you are going to have to plan for more hives. You're going to have to plan for more equipment. You're going to end up needing better equipment. And you're going to have to think about what to do with all these bees that make more bees. You're gonna have to sell or give some away. So just if you're getting good at it now and you think I'd like to stick with 3, you're not going to stick with 3. The bees are going to want to swarm. They're going to want to be split. They're going to want to grow. You can let them escape into the trees. But if you'd rather give some away to the local club, help somebody else get into it, start thinking about that now. If you're getting good, it's going to grow. So thank you so much. And if this has been, I'd like to know any questions or comments. If this has been too much or too conceptual or anything, if you'd like more detail, I'd love to meet the needs of people. So if this isn't doing it, please speak up. There's Brooks' info, my info. We've been doing a lot of help with people on winter prep, mite sampling, and treatment advice right now. But yeah, please, if you got any questions, thoughts, or comments, I'd love to hear them. And thanks so much for putting up with me, listening to me.
Oh, it was so good, Nick. Thank you so much. There's a lot of info in there and great flow. I think it really was great. We have a thank you from Colin in the chat, and folks are able, if they want to unmute and ask a question, that works, or stick it in the chat. Raise your hand. I can call on you. Anything like that. I think some people have logged off, but we got some thumbs up. Awesome.
Well, good.
Great presentation. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks so much. I'm glad.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people too that are probably gonna like chew on that and reach out and be like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna use some of this, or it's gonna come through in ways when they're in their bee yard. Like, he told me this is, so I think it's sinking in. We got some folks typing in the chat here too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of tips for people of all ranges. It was a great presentation.
Good, glad to hear it.
Would love to have you out.
If that's Michael, I think Brooke, if it's the Michael, I think Brooke might have passed me your info, and I will be reaching out very shortly tomorrow.
Oh, excellent. Good. And are you seeing the chat too?
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so best practice for winterizing insulation, open door, closed screen. I think closed screen, and the VBA talk with Bill Hesbach really opened my eyes, showing what the thermodynamics are in a hive, how they're hypoxia tolerant. His advice, and I think it makes a ton of sense, was you want that single, 1-2 inch open entrance. He doesn't even want a top entrance. He wants insulation above the inner cover so that you're keeping the dew point off of the inner cover, because as the bees get air drawn in, the air circulates, it draws moisture out, spreads heat, goes out the entrance with the moisture. If there's no insulation on that inner cover and the dew point reaches it, the warmth and the cold meet, and then it rains, and that kills bees. That's the moisture that kills bees. He doesn't even want moisture control up there, just insulation. And then he does fully insulate his hives. And his point is, if you look at the thermodynamics and you look at the actual thermal heat patterns on them, a tree, the thickness in it, that's real insulation. Langstroths are dog houses by comparison, he said, and it makes sense. So I think insulation certainly helps. When I used to overwinter in Mass, much different animal of a winter, very gentle. We just did really black wrap, something to draw heat in. And he also, Bill talks about even having, to help with radiant heat, putting the silver reflective stuff on so that it's helping bounce heat back. So insulation, closed screen, that 1 to 2 inch open at the bottom, and not even on top, just insulation on the top, then the outer cover. Overwintered a hive in a single deep. There was a beekeeper I worked with in New York, John Miller, who that's all he does. He runs about 80, 100 colonies. He drops them down into a single deep. He has them in a wide open field. They get snow. He was probably out towards, I'm trying to remember where he was exactly, out towards Lake Ontario. So he drops them down into a single. He gets those up to, with weight, everything he can, 80, 90 pounds of honey in those things. Pushes them all together so they're in tight rows together. And he, from what I can see based on year to year, he had great success rate on survival, and that's what he always talked about. So it's population, and as we saw, if you're talking about 70, 80 pounds of honey in a winter, if that's enough in there based on the cluster size, you can get them through that way. If you can afford the risk of losing one, give it a shot. But I would say strength of the cluster and the population in terms of not being at all beset by mites, having a really good population in there, and then heavy as can be would be what you need. And still, he also used insulation to keep the dew point off. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, we got one more question maybe coming. Oh, we got a thanks.
No problem. Again, and I hope it wasn't too conceptual at times or too numbers driven, but I really do think those numbers, again, whatever you can keep in your mind about just volume of effort, scale of effort, and the way those scales move just helps inform your beekeeping, your decision making, read the tea leaves, and react to what you're seeing. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think the chat box I don't see any more dots. So if everyone's good, I think we can sign off. Great job, Nick. Thanks so much. That was really, really great. I think it was helpful for, I think, basically any beekeeper. I learned a lot, honestly. I mean, not that I know a lot, but like there were things like for everyone in there. It was just really informative, and yeah, lots. I'm still chewing on it, so that's why I can't even like pull it all out. I'm gonna I'll be thinking of it every time I go into my bees now. We got Matt typing. Let his
Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Matt. Awesome. Well, I guess we'll sign off and give everyone their evening back, and thanks for joining, and we look forward to next time.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Thanks,
good end of the
everybody.
season, everybody.
Bye.